What if the man you called Papa is the reason your daughter is buried in the ground? What if the hands that lay blessings are the same hands that took her life? Today's confession is a disturbing exposé about a so-called prophet whose dark secrets were hidden behind polished sermons and spiritual directions. But one man, one grieving brother, is about to open your eyes. The truth, it's darker than you're ready for. A warning, a mirror to the spiritual confusion that's destroying homes from the inside out. But if you dare to watch, then prepare yourself, because what you call prophecy might just be blood sacrifice in disguise. Now before we dive in, let me remind you, we don't just expose darkness, we fight it. And if you've been battling spiritual attacks, confusion, or if your home is under siege, we have a prayer family waiting for you. Join our Telegram channel and WhatsApp prayer line, where we fast, pray, and stand in the gap together. Just drop in your prayer request and we will help with prayers. And we are working on hosting live prayers on these channels together with all of you. The link is in the description. Now, let's get into this confession.
They say sometimes silence is protection, and looking back now, I realize that keeping my distance might have been the only reason I'm still alive to tell this story. I was never a fan of that church. Not because I hated religion, or because I didn't believe in God. I do. I always have. But there was something about that man of God, that so-called prophet, that never sat well with me. It all started when my mother and younger sister began attending his services religiously. I mean that literally. Monday night. Wednesday prophetic hour. Friday deliverance. Sunday celebration. They never missed a single one. At first, I thought it was just another spiritual phase. You know how people jump from church to church, looking for healing, miracles, hope. But this wasn't a phase. It became an obsession. My mother, a woman who once used to be so grounded, so financially cautious, started giving away all her savings. Not tithes. Not offerings. She would send huge sums of money to this man. She even borrowed money on behalf of the church without telling me. I confronted her. Ma, this man is not God. You need to slow down. But I was met with anger and tears. She accused me of being rebellious, cursed me with scriptures, and swore that Papa was the vessel of her breakthrough. My sister was quieter about it, but more dangerous. One day, she came home after a direction from the prophet. I overheard her talking on the phone, sounding emotional, trembling even. I didn't hear the full conversation, but I heard her say, "I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to be free from this delay." When I asked her what was going on, she brushed me off. Said I wouldn't understand. Something changed after that. She was often missing from home, claiming she was at all-night prayers at the prophet's house, but I knew better. She came home drained, eyes red, spirit broken. There was a night I even saw her weeping at dawn. She had blood on her dress. I tried to ask questions. But again, she shut down. Always shut down. The truth. I gave up. My warnings meant nothing in that house. My mother idolized the prophet. My sister was blindly following his every instruction. So I distanced myself. Until she died. You see, they said it was internal bleeding. That's what the hospital wrote. But it didn't make sense. She wasn't sick. She was only 22. And just days before, I saw her, smiling, hopeful, walking around with this heavy burden I couldn't name. The pain of her burial wasn't even over when the prophet came to our house and told my mother that he saw in the spirit that my sister had committed an abortion, and that's what killed her. No shame. No remorse. Just prophecy, as usual. I was in the corner of the room, fist clenched. I didn't believe a word that came out of his mouth. But my mother. She cried like a child. She begged God for mercy. She gave the prophet another seed. Can you imagine? That's when I made a vow. I was going to find the truth, even if it took my life. But what I found was darker than I ever imagined. 2 months after my sister's death, my mother fell gravely ill. The same woman who had followed the prophet like a disciple was now bedridden. Strange illness. No diagnosis. Hospital after hospital, prayer after prayer, nothing changed. And some of her friends kept telling her that she should not think too much of my sister's passing, because they believed that might also be part of the reason of her sickness. That's when I broke protocol. I visited a prophet from a different town, one with no affiliation to my mother's church, no agenda, no interest in my story. The moment he started talking, he said, "Your sister was pregnant with a seed that wasn't supposed to be. The man who gave it to her needed blood. Both the blood of the child and the vessel that carried it." My hands went cold. He continued that the same altar now cries out for more. It is not finished, and your mother is the next sacrifice. I was shocked. He didn't know me. He didn't know my story. But everything he said pierced my spirit like a sword. My mind flashed back to the times I saw my sister weeping. The night I saw the blood. The way the prophet quickly claimed it was an abortion, as if rehearsed. It all made sense. My sister was pregnant with his child. And the abortion wasn't her choice, it was part of a ritual. And now, my mother was next in line. I sat in silence, staring at the wall. The church they trusted had become a slaughterhouse. The prophet they honored was feeding an altar that demanded blood. And I had almost stayed quiet. I didn't rush back home after meeting the new prophet I met. I sat in my car, parked outside his compound, trembling. My hands refused to touch the steering wheel. My heart was beating so loudly I could barely hear my own thoughts. Those words replayed in my mind like a thunderclap. My sister. My baby sister. Pregnant, not by a boyfriend, not by a mistake, but by the man she called Papa. I had to tell my mother, even though I knew she wouldn't want to hear it. Still, I drove home, fighting every thought in my mind. By the time I stepped into our small living room, she was lying on the sofa, her eyes sunken, her body frail. Her favorite worship songs were playing from the Bluetooth speaker beside her. I told her everything. I explained how I had gone to a different pastor, how the man saw things no one could know. About my sister. About her passing. About what the prophet had done. At first, she listened in silence. I hoped this would break her. That she'd finally snap out of whatever spiritual spell she was under. But when I finished, she sat up, weak as she was, and hissed. "You still haven't changed, have you? You've always hated the man of God. Even when he tried to help your sister, you fought him. Now you want to destroy what's left of my faith." I was stunned. She clutched her wrapper, struggling to her feet. Her face twisted in pain, both physical and emotional. She raised her voice with a strength I didn't even think she had left. "If you don't respect the anointing on that man, then leave. I don't want to hear anything else." My heart shattered. I wasn't just losing my sister again. I was losing my mother too, to this deception, this demonic grip dressed in white collars and cassocks. That night, I cried harder than I did at the funeral. Because this time, I was burying the idea that I could save her with logic or truth. It was no longer just a prophet she trusted, it was her God. But I couldn't give up. Something had shifted in me after that revelation. I wasn't just curious anymore. I was burning with righteous anger. I was desperate to expose this man, not just for my family's sake, but for the dozens of families he was still deceiving. The next day, I called two of my sister's close friends from church. The ones who had grown distant after her death. I didn't want to confront them. I wanted to listen. I asked simple questions about their work and the things they might have seen or heard from my sister. At first, they hesitated. But one of them, the girl named Rebecca, finally opened up. She said my sister once confided that she felt spiritually trapped. That every time she wanted to leave the church, something would happen, strange dreams, sudden sickness, fear of backlash. Then Rebecca whispered something that confirmed everything. She told me she once woke up in Papa's guest room, bleeding. She didn't remember how she got there. But she said he told her, "It's done. God has seen your sacrifice." Rebecca continued that, my sister cried when she told me. She said she felt dead inside. But she was too afraid to speak. That day, I made a vow, if she couldn't speak, I would. I began tracking down former members who had quietly left the church. Some were too afraid to talk. Others were still under his grip. But slowly, one name kept coming up, the room of fire. A secret chamber inside the church premises. Where directions were given. Where prayer cloths were anointed. And where only certain women were ever allowed to enter. I want you to understand that there are places in this world where the walls remember pain. Where prayers don't go up because the ceiling is soaked in blood and the air is heavy with secrets. That's what the room of fire felt like. It wasn't on the church map. No member ever casually mentioned it. But from the whispers I'd gathered, it existed behind the choir rehearsal hall, past the door marked authorized personnel only. Just a heavy wooden door and a reinforced lock. But by the grace of God, I got in. A former church staff member, someone who once cleaned the compound and had quietly walked away from the ministry, agreed to help me. On one condition. If you ever mention my name, I'm already dead. I nodded. This was beyond fear now. It was a weekday, midday. The church was mostly empty, just a few lingering intercessors and the maintenance team. I wore a delivery vest. Pretended I was with a water supplier. Walked right in. And there it was. The room of fire. The cleaner led me through the hallway and unlocked the door with a key he had kept from his last day at the job. Whatever you see inside, he warned, just remember, this is where power was manufactured. Not prayer. Not fasting. Power. And that is the reason I left the church. He opened the door. And what I saw chilled me to the core. I knew I couldn't just walk away. I took photos. Of the markings. The cross. The basin. The scarf. Everything. My hands were shaking. But I needed this proof. For me. For my mother. As I turned to leave, the cleaner whispered, they say the prophet doesn't even pray here anymore. His spirit travels. But when it does return, this is the landing pad. A portal. He nodded. I was shocked. This wasn't a church. This was a gateway for something darker. The man who laid hands on worshippers was not just a prophet, he was a host. And every Sunday, that altar fed off desperation, pain, and innocent blood. When I went back home, I couldn't sleep. So I began to piece it together. The mysterious miscarriages among young choir members that I talked to. The death of a young usher weeks after giving a special seed in private. It all pointed back to that room of fire. And to the man who ran it. Let me pause here and speak to whoever is listening. Every prophetic oil is not from God. Every mantle is not divine. Some carry the blood of people who never knew they were sacrificed. This is why discernment is life or death. If your pastor never tells you to test the spirits, run. If your deliverance always requires your isolation, run. And if your church defends the man more than it defends the truth, run for your soul. Because my sister died thinking she was serving God. And if I hadn't kept digging, my mother would have been next.
If you watched this far, I want you to know, this story was more than a confession. It was a cry for discernment. A wake-up call to the body of Christ. There are altars hiding in pulpits, and fear masquerading as faith. But truth, no matter how dangerous, must be told. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for more raw, unfiltered, and spiritually eye-opening confessions. Join our prayer community on Telegram and WhatsApp. The links are in the description. And tell us in the comments, do you believe some pastors are knowingly manipulating people with fear? Let's talk about it. Until next upload, stay awake, stay prayerful, and stay discerning.